Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Good morning, Glenn.
Hey, what's up, Mikey? Good morning.
Got
Sober.Coffee. Man, look, wow, it's 3/4 of the way full. I might have to go get a refill.
Well, we'll just, we hang around here long enough.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
So, how you doing this morning? Are you ready for a big session?
I'm always ready for a session. I'm always curious about what we're going to talk about. Some of these are planned, some of these are not. It's just like jumping in the coffee shop with us. And we just love coming in and talking about sobriety, talking about experience, strength, and hope. And we also love chatting with people out there. So our email, for those listeners who want to plug in. Now, just a reminder, our email is totally anonymous because I know a lot of people's emails have their real name on them. But we will never share names, and we will keep them anonymous. But it's podcast@sober.coffee. So if you ever have a question for us, you ever want to jump on and join us in the coffee shop, we'd be glad to have you. The coffee's always full and always hot.
Yeah, reach out and check out the website too, because the resource room is always growing. We always have new stuff in there. And
oh man, you're doing a good job in that resource room, Mikey.
I know, I love it.
Nice work, man. Nice work.
There's a couple Zoom rooms if you want to catch a 12-step meeting that sometimes you'll find Glenn or I at. And yeah, check out the resource room.
Speaking of rooms, I actually went to my first in-person meeting in probably 9 months. Shame on me, but I go to probably 7 or 10 Zoom meetings a week, but I finally went in person and I felt like a newbie. I felt like a newcomer walking in the room again. It was great.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, you betcha. So Glenn, we have our laptops in the coffee shop again today because we're going to
I love it.
We're going to go high tech. We're going to Zoom somebody in. What do you think?
Man, I love Zooming. Let's do it.
All right. Well, you probably have a better introduction to this because you've known Lisa a little longer than I have. But you started out in Twitterville with Lisa, right?
Yeah. So I've got a Twitter account. It's at Stay Sober Today. It's not really associated with the show. It started probably 7 years ago or so. But and it's anonymous, but it's me. And I put it out there just to connect with sober people and just kind of share some things because early on, there were some thoughts I had and questions I had, and I didn't want to say this stuff out loud in the room, or I didn't want to say it to my sponsor, and I was just still putting my toe in the water a lot. So I threw it out there on Twitter, and I think I've got 2,500, people I connect with, and I go to it daily now. And sometimes I share stuff about the show, but I just share thoughts out there and I engage with people and it's really valuable to me. I've got a lot of good tips, a lot of good tools from there. And about a year ago, my timelines, are terrible. But about a year ago, I started following this woman, Lisa Boucher. And I just learned how to say her name because I would have said Boucher, but it's Boucher, but it's Boucher. And I'm telling you, it was just, some people put out sarcastic stuff and some people put out stuff that doesn't make sense at all. And she put out filet mignon. Just really good stuff that I was able to bite into and chew on. And I actually thought about it through the day and I talked to other people about it. And so, along the way we connected and I said, hey, we're doing this podcast. Hey, she's an author and she's got so much going on. And I said, hey, would you ever consider, jumping on our podcast with us? And believe it or not, she said yes. So great to have her here. Mikey, I'll bounce it back to you for the official welcome. But Lisa, really pumped to have you here this morning. Looking forward to hearing about all your projects and all your stuff. But, most specifically, just about the tools of sobriety and how you're embracing that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And Glenn handed me the ball and said, hey, she wrote a book. Well, I'm the reader. I'm the reader of the two. So
yes, you are.
I quickly went to Amazon, where me and the Amazon guy have a personal relationship. And I said, I got to have this book, Raising the Bottom. And so he was so nice. He delivered it the next day, and I cracked it open, and I won't do it justice. Lisa's going to definitely walk us through the book a little bit, but I got to tell you, she had me at the intro. She had me in the first pages of the book because I could relate so much to her story, and most importantly, and then I'll shut up and talk to Lisa here. But most importantly, she's as serious about sobriety as I am. It's a big deal. We banter back and forth here. We joke a lot. We laugh at silly things, and life is about laughing at silly things. But this addiction pandemic, epidemic that we're in right now is serious, and it's destroying lives. And I don't want to be the doggy downer, but this is a serious thing. And so when you said you get your teeth into the posts that Lisa puts out, that's how I traveled through this book. I mean, it was all meat, and I just sunk my teeth into it. And I kind of feel like I got to know Lisa throughout the book, and got to know her mission about saving people and maybe giving them a shot to make a decision about consumption long before it's too late. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. Lisa, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Hey, Lisa, good morning.
Good morning.
We love having you. We're equal geographic people, so we love people from the East Coast.
I'm happy to be here.
But though you would probably consider yourself more of a Midwestern, right?
A Midwestern, yeah.
Definitely. Sure.
Definitely.
So Lisa, your book, Raising the Bottom, Making Mindful Choices in a Drinking Culture. I wanted to say, why did you write it? But boy, when I read it, I realized why you wrote it. But let me ask you the question. Why did you write the book at this time in your life?
Well, prior to the show, we were talking about I used to write fiction. So this was my fifth book, I think. And when I think I started writing really once I got... it was after I graduated nursing school, because from reading my book, I got sober, went to nursing school, finished nursing school, and like 3 days later, I start writing. I heard this voice in my kitchen, now I want you to write a book. I don't know if it was God, an angel, whatever, but that's what started the writing trajectory. So I wrote fiction. And my mother, along her journey, when she got sober, she used to, we'd talk because she was in Youngstown. And I'm 4 hours south of her. And so we would talk a lot on the phone. And she said, what are you working on? Or what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm writing so-and-so book. And she used to say, she was always saying, Lisa, why don't you write about alcoholism and women? And, there's so many legs to that stool. Which one do you pick? You can go in a million directions with it. So I never did much with it. And then my mom passed in 2011. And I think it was her tapping me on the shoulder, because maybe a year or so after her death, I woke up one morning and it's like a little banner, birdie flew into my head, and I'm like, that's it. And I just knew immediately, raising the bottom, that, I had a very high bottom. And you read my book, so my mother, Mike, had a very low bottom. And that, it just all came together, that it's like, that's what I need to write about, that we don't have to hit these horrid bottoms, destroy our health and our lives and our families. We really don't have to. And I think that's one of the things in addiction that really bothers me a lot. You got to hit rock bottom. Well, no, you don't. Stop. We've got to stop saying that. Everybody's bottom can be different. And there are some people that are stubborn as hell, and they are going to have to hit those bottoms. But I think if we change the narrative and start talking about, some of the earlier symptoms, like I did in my book, this restless, irritable discontent that our big book talks about, or, my life was not working. When you're in college for 10 years, and you can't gather a degree together, what's going on? And I tell parents, when you have an adult child that just cannot launch and get out of your basement, the first thing you should do is be looking at what are they addicted to? Are they addicted? You know, maybe they're not, but a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, that is the underlying issue. They're drinking, they're smoking pot all day, or they're doing some other drug or substance that prevents them from achieving the goals in their lives, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what brought it about.
Yeah, you know, I love how you talk about bottoms. You know, I was one of those ones because I was stubborn and I was trying to do it my own way. And I was, you know, we chatted about the word surrender earlier. I didn't want to surrender. I wanted to do it my way. And I was always smarter. I was always the smartest guy in the room. And I had to find my bottom, and I found my bottom. I kept digging, and I found new bottoms. And I finally found a bottom that just wasn't bearable for me, you know, and that's where I surrendered, and I use the words, I just cannot take another drink. But I work with some guys, you know, sponsor some guys who I'm amazed. You know, they still have their house, they still have their cars, they still have their jobs, they still have their families, and things weren't working for them as well as they could. But they didn't keep digging. You know, they were able to, you know, see the light. And so I love the fact you say you don't have to hit rock bottom. You don't have to lose everything.
No.
Yeah, I heard in the room one time that the bottom is when you decide to quit digging, right? And I'm going to get a smile from Lisa right now, but me personally, I was tore up from the floor up. That's my new line. I love it. And you know, I was ripped apart. I had to find, it was my bottom, comparable to nobody else's. They obviously, I thought, could not feel my pain or relate to my bottom. It turns out I walked into the rooms and people were at the same place emotionally. They were just in a different place physically. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we all do have our different, I think in recovery, the pain tolerance gets less and less. I have a very low pain tolerance now, which is a blessing, right? Because then it keeps us on course. Because when you can stand all that suffering forever, it does prolong it. But I do think a lot of it is the societal narrative. I mean, think about how drinking it's just so prevalent and so pushed, and it's assumed that you're going to drink. And we all need to start saying, you know, when somebody offers a diabetic a cupcake and they refuse it, they don't get 20 questions.
Right.
No, they don't.
Right? So what is
that's right.
And I think we all need to start saying, you know, no is a full stop, right? And just pushing.
No is a full sentence, right?
Exactly. And pushing back against some of this ridiculousness. I mean, it really is, if you think about it. It is the only drug in the world that people badger you to use it. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, you know, I saw something recently, which I love, and I'm amazed. I mean, I have read 1 million plus things about sobriety and, you know, all the statements and quips and whatever. And now memes, right? But, you know, it's amazing. I still find fresh new stuff. And I just saw something recently really hit me. He said, I want to, and some woman said out there, she goes, I want to glamorize sobriety to the same level that these big vodka companies and liquor companies glamorize drinking, you know? And I really aligned with that because sobriety, I remember I was at a party, this is 30 years ago, and I met the first sober person. And she goes, I'm in AA and I don't drink. And I was like, oh my God, I felt sorry for her. Like, I really felt sorry for her. And that was my mentality for many years, well, until recently when I sober myself and I'm living a great life. And I'm like, I understand what that girl said about, you know, glamorizing sobriety. So I really like that.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's what we need to all do. Make it cool. Sobriety is the new cool, right?
Yeah, I mean, what you said about, you know, working down the bottom, for me, I got used to, you know, it's like boiling a frog. You know, I mean, if I was at, you know, 10,000 foot and you say, hey, Glenn, if you keep drinking, you're going to go to zero. First of all, I wouldn't have believed you. Mm-hmm. Second of all, you know, I didn't go from 10,000 to zero in one day. I went, you know, 1 or 2 or 4 feet a day, you know, and progressively over time. You know, and just like a frog, you know, if you put a frog in boiling water, he's going to jump out. But if you turn the degree up, he's going to sit there until he boils. And I boiled, you know, and so I'm really aware of that. But I also realize with recovery, I don't go from 0 to 10,000 in one day. That's just not me. I mean, some people do, and that's great. I applaud them, and I'm kind of jealous. But it's a couple steps up every day, and you eventually get to the 10,000 or 20,000 foot.
Right. It's good stuff. And one of the things that jumped out at me early on in the book when you talked about your turning point, and there were several references to your turning point, but the sentence that struck out to me was the exact same sentence that I said out loud. And I said, is this it? You know, is this really where my life has become? What happened along the way? Drinking was fun for, I don't know, a minute. And then drinking became fun with some problems. And then drinking became problems. And, you know, is this it? And that was my turning point for me. It was just a realization that I had rode that pony as far as I could ride her, you know, and I needed more. And I think your book delivers on more. So after you talk about the challenges you had growing up and the challenges you had in your early adulthood, you quickly moved to the promise and some tools and hope. You know, I love it. I love to read that way. What kind of was your talk about your turning point, your moment of clarity, if you will, and then what you immediately started doing about to change the course of your direction that you were on?
Well, I think for most of us, we know long before we quit drinking that we should probably quit drinking, that we're drinking too much. And so for me, it was about 2 years. I quit drinking when I was 29, and I think I started to realize I was drinking too much around 27. You know, I was a flight attendant, and you're living that lifestyle all over. And it wasn't until we were living in Texas, we moved back to Dayton, and I went back to a marketing job, a 9-to-5 job. So I went from this big, like the first year of our marriage was like one big date, right? And it was just fun. And we're meeting in different cities, and it's just fun. And we come back to Dayton, and it was like real life. And I just couldn't cope. I mean, it was like this 9-to-5 routine. My husband was building his law practice. He's busy. I was like, I just couldn't deal. I could not deal with a normal life. So I'm hitting the bars. And my turning point was, like I said, I'm working in this marketing job, and I was about 2 blocks from this adorable little bar that I started to go to at lunchtime. And I remember sashaying over there one morning, and I'm like furiously pulling on the handle, and it's not opening. And I'm being, I am like panicked, you know, that where your heart starts beating, and I'm having like a meltdown internally because I can't get this door open. And I look at my watch, and it's 10 in the morning. And that was like a bucket of cold water. That hit me hard. You know, one of those things that like you have that moment of kind of clarity, but you shove it down. But that really startled me, like, because I was always like, I don't drink in the morning. But it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm craving a drink. So that really bothered me. I go back to work, and then I went at noon, you know, and the whole bar knows you kind of thing. It was like my
absolutely do.
Right, yeah. So
they've got your number.
That's always a red flag when everybody in the bar knows you. Clearly, you're there too much, you know. So those were the things that started to, and then like I said, you know, I'd been in college for 10 years, hadn't finished my degree. I was just kind of floundering, really. So that's when I knew that it was probably my drinking. And then my husband said something about it. And my mother started to chirp in my ear because by now she, I think, was 7 years sober. And she was chirping in my ear when we were living in Dallas. She said she noticed that, I guess she heard the beer cans popping at 10 in the morning as I'm on the balcony, painting my nails. And she tells this funny story because we're a big foodie family. We're Italian, and everything is about the food. And she said, I knew something was wrong with you, Lisa, when you made this stew and you just put the whole pot on the table. You didn't put bowls or spoons or anything. And I thought, what is wrong with her?
That's awesome.
No presentation, right?
Right, like it's just this pot of stew. So she was so appalled with that. But those are like the little things that it's like it's just not normal. So I know when, like I said, she started to say something, and it's just, I can't say it was anything dramatic, but I had these things that, and I wish I did write them down, but I can't remember exactly everything. But I kind of had these little, for myself, I said, okay, if this happens, or this happens, I will know I have a drinking problem. One of them was if I get drunk when I don't mean to get drunk, because it's different when you plan on going out.
Right.
Right. So that happened. And there was like 3 days in a row where I didn't really mean to get drunk, but I got drunk. And then that story about when I'm riding that little motorcycle through the beer drive-through 16 times. And the guy at the drive-through is like, lady, why don't you just buy a 12 pack? And I'm like, I would never drink that much. And I go home and literally I'm looking at a trash can that is just cascading with beer cans.
That's awesome.
And it was just like another slap in the face. And then there was one more thing, and I can't remember what it was, but those all happened within like a 3-day period. And I just knew, and I called my mom and I said, I need to come home. And I went home, and she had her AA women were like a bunch of bees, and they were buzzing in that house.
I can picture that.
Oh, yeah. She had a whole posse of women and coffee dates, and that went on for about a week. And I was going to stay a little longer, and then I was like, you know what? I don't live here. I need to go back to Dayton and figure this out. So I came back, stayed sober 3 months, had a 1-day relapse. So that's another proof that meeting makers don't always make it, because I was going to a meeting every day, but I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't work any steps, and I'm mad as hell, even though nobody told me that I had to get sober. But I'm still pissed. I'm just angry at the whole thing, that I really don't want to quit drinking, but I know that I probably should. And it was a struggle having a higher bottom, because I'm sitting, when I got sober, in the rooms, you know, it was a bunch of crusty old men. Sure. And they drank for decades, and they drank long and hard, and I really couldn't relate. And I almost walked out the door, because I'm like, I don't think I'm really an alcoholic, because I wasn't drinking every day, and nothing bad really happened. You know, I hadn't been in jail, no DUI. So it is very easy to justify your drinking, and, you know, but it was what it was doing to me emotionally. And just like, and I really want people to understand that it's not based on quantity, because I think people have this thing in their head that unless they're drinking a fifth a day or 30 beers a day or whatever, that they can't have a drinking problem. And that is not true. It's what does that alcohol do to you? How does it change you when you ingest it? And for me, I am a pretty stable, even-keeled person, and it made me like this, like labile. I was all over the board, and that's just not my baseline personality. So I knew something was wrong, and I was crying all the time. And I'm not a crier. I think it's been 15 years since I'm not a crier. So I'm like bawling and screaming and raging, and I'm like, something is not right. And my husband said, why do you have emotional problems? And I'm very grateful I didn't jump on that and grab on that, because as an RN, I see that a lot. Mm-hmm. People would rather come to the psych ward and be told they have anxiety and depression and bipolar and any number of mental health diagnoses than get sober. And in every darn chart, 9 times out of 10, not all, but 9 times out of 10, substance abuse is the underlying issue. We would not have full psych wards if we didn't have the addiction problem that we have. And these doctors, that's a whole other, you know, I could go on for hours about that, because it infuriates me of what happens to people when they come to the hospital. They just get medicated, they don't address the addiction, and their life rolls on like what happened with my mother, you know, that her addiction just went on.
Yeah, totally get that. And you said a couple things I just want to revisit. You said some real pearls here. One, when you went to meetings with all the crowds of the old men, first of all, I try not to be one of those guys. right? But when I talk to folks that come in early, especially like first step meetings, the first time that they're at a meeting, because for me, I went in, I looked at all the differences, and I'm like, I don't belong here. I'm not like that. I'm not like that. I don't dress like that, But somebody said, hey, Glenn, look at the similarities, not the differences. And I started looking, I'm like, okay, did that. Okay, I'm there. I've done that. Boy, my head feels like that right now. And then very quickly I realized I'm in the right place. Secondly, I love what you said about how much you drink. I remember going to rehab and there was a guy in there. And, I was drinking a handle of vodka a day. I think that's 2 fists. And so I felt, hey, I'm an alcoholic. I qualify. And there's a guy in my rehab that drank a 6-pack a day. And I'm like, what? Why are you here? Like, he says, hey, I'm on my way to work. I pick up a 6-pack. I drink it while I'm at work. I shouldn't be drinking while I'm at work. It's ruined my family. I lost my job. And a 6-pack a day caught his attention and said, hey, I need to get to 0, And then I could speak for hours about what you just said about the psych wards and doctors because, and I won't, but we've talked about it on other episodes. I had doctors give me every diagnosis in the world, except for alcoholism. In fact, I had a doctor told me I was borderline schizophrenic. And guess what? Doctors, guess what? I stopped drinking. And at one point, I was on 11 meds. I mean, these were major meds. Seroquel, 1,250 milligrams a day. That's major drugs. I mean, if I took that right now, I'd be asleep for a month. Right? But they give you one drug and then they give you another drug to counteract that drug. And then I was on 11 different major drugs. And I'm like, that's one of the most irresponsible things. Nobody sat there and really talked to me about my alcoholism. Now, full transparency, I would have lied to him anyhow. I probably did lie to him because I knew what I wanted to say because I knew what I was self-medicating through them. But it's amazing how all that went away. And I'm on no meds today. Well, I am on a gastro med, but that has nothing to do with.
Right. No, Glenn, I think it's really important that we do talk about that more because people's lives are being destroyed. That exact thing happened to my mother in the 60s. Her addiction started with Valium, which was
all that. That's
first $1 billion drug. That whole Sackler. I don't know if you guys read The Dynasty of Pain. That's an amazing book about the Sackler family and the opioid epidemic and all that, and how they knew what they were doing. And these doctors, I'm saying they're either corrupt and incompetent, or they're just ignoring the fact, and I've seen it, like I've lost so much respect for a lot of the doctors because, they really don't care so much about the people when they walk out of their office. They're worried about their kid's soccer game and what vacation they're doing and if their wife or their husband or their partner is mad at them or whatever. And they really don't care that they're destroying lives, what are these medications doing to your heart, to your liver, to your kidney?
Took me years to recover from that because I had all my blood tests from when I went in to get all my detoxes. And then 10 years later, it took 10 years to repair a lot of those numbers. It was amazing.
Well, that's it. And that's something that's very, very serious. Like those meds are not without side effects. And for people to be taking, like Glenn was saying, 11 medications, are you kidding me? Like, how is that even effective? They're just throwing pills at people and saying, go home and die, basically. It disgusts me. And I just think we need to talk about it because people need to understand these doctors do not always have your best interest at heart. They really don't. And you need to wake up to that fact. And, like God says, physician, heal thyself. Start, looking into more holistic methods of getting well because Big Pharma offers no cures. They want customers. And if people understand that on a very basic level, I think your healing can start sooner.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a shoulder surgery coming up in June of 2022. And I had my left one rebuilt 10 years ago. And that was disaster for me. I mean, that was 6 months of pain. I took a lot of opioids. And so now, I'm handling it differently, right? I mean, there's no way I'm going through that surgery without some sort of pain medication, right? It's just impossible. I mean, it's such searing pain. But this is my game plan this time. It's different. My doctor knows. When I scheduled the surgery, I looked at my dude and I'm like, look, full transparency, I'm an alcoholic. I got 7 years, coming up on 7 years sobriety. I said, I need the pain meds, right? But let's manage them. And I said, I'm telling you right up front. I said, I don't have a problem with opioids, but I don't want a problem with opioids, and I don't want opioids to open the door back to booze, right? So my doctor knows. He's on my team. My sponsor knows. He's on my team. And my wife is going to manage the pills, right? So, it doesn't mean because I'm alcoholic that I shouldn't take opioids and sit there with searing pain for 6 weeks.
We don't have to be martyrs, but exactly that you have a plan that actually makes sense, The only part of that plan I'm going to disagree with is telling your doctor, unless they understand addiction, which most of them don't, doesn't really mean anything. Because as a nurse who used to work in a level 1 trauma center in the emergency room, and I can't tell you how many patients I would see coming in and would do the responsible thing and say to the doctor, hey, I'm in recovery, as he's sitting there nodding, writing a script for Norco.
Right.
And he'd hand it to him, and I would tell him, well, if you're in recovery and you have a problem with opiates, you better rip this up right now. Because clearly the doctor didn't understand what you just said. He could have written them a prescription for Tramadol, which is at least not an opioid.
Yeah, but he actually, because when I said that to him, that's the first thing he said. And I'm like, dude, that doesn't work for me. I have a high...
Not for a shoulder surgery.
Right,
because that's one of the biggest. I know my son's from football, because you're involving back muscles, chest
everything.
Muscles. It is one of the hardest joints to rehab. Mm-hmm. So I get what you're saying on that. But I'm saying as an example for this other person who was like, I don't want any opioids, and the doctor gave it to him anyway.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, you have to own your own. You have to own your own game.
You have to be responsible, because I've seen people say, "Well, my doctor prescribed." Well, come on, you can have a lot of dishonest motives and go doctor shop and get what you want and say, "Well, but it's prescribed."
I have a sponsor that did that. I mean, he was addicted to Xanax. And he's like, I said, dude, you're acting different. He goes, well, my doctor gave me. I'm like, did you tell your doctor you're a Xanax addict and you're an alcoholic?
Right.
He goes, well, no. I'm like, well, why not? He said, because he wouldn't have given it to me. I'm like, dude, you might as well just bottom on the corner,
Yeah, we have to be responsible for ourselves, because these doctors wreck a lot of people.
Absolutely. So, question. You're out there on a lot of social media. I love your content. I mean, as I said earlier, a lot of meat. What are you doing? Like, what's your strategy there? What's your why? And I mean, I'm sure you're connected with some really cool people, right?
Well, I think so. But, I'm making kind of a shift, Glenn, with this. I'm shifting a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit from... we get sober, we find recovery, but now we have to sustain it and live in it. And that's where I think we need to, that's where I want to kind of shift. And so, like with my next book that's coming out, it has more of a spiritual component, because for me, what is keeping me sober? Who is keeping me sober? It is my connection with God. And I believe that this is a spiritual program. And people that don't believe in God still find their way. I mean, I had a very good friend who was a self-proclaimed atheist, who was the most sweetest guy ever. And I really don't believe he was an atheist, because when you got to know him and you hear him talk, I think he was more agnostic, but he wanted to say he was an atheist, whatever. But just a super, super person. So, he found a way to live, but that's kind of where I want to focus. It's like we get sober and it's all like, oh yeah. Well, now you got to sustain it and you got to live it. And it's not always easy living sober in our boozy culture, like we were talking earlier, with relationships. I know my marriage early on, well, I don't know, not early on, for a long time was very challenging, and had I not had the twins right away, I might have gotten a divorce. But, once I had the twins, I'm like, I'm not trying to be a single mother with twins and all this stuff. And thank God, we're still married. We can't believe it. We laugh all the time about
That's great.
How did that happen? And I remember, this is a true story, and I want to tell you this. So our marriage was such a wreck, but my kids were like 7 years old. And I had, again, my criteria. I told my husband, I'm going to France. I wanted to go to Lourdes. And I kind of decided if he balks or says one word about me going, that's it, I'm going to file for divorce. And for whatever reason, he just nodded and was okay with nannying the kids and all this. So I went to France, to Lourdes. And that's a spiritual place. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. The Blessed Virgin Mary, Jesus' mom, appeared to these peasant children there. And where she appeared was like in a grotto, and a spring has sprung up. And so now there's this healing water that many, many miracles have happened in Lourdes, where there's crutches hanging from these, wires that they put up, people that literally were healed. And you go into these baths, and it's just and I went, it was very empty, and it was very spiritual. And I came back healed in a different way. I didn't get maybe the healing I thought, but I got the strength to endure in my marriage, to keep our family intact for my sons. And I remember standing in my kitchen, and we were thinking about doing counseling and all this. And I was like, I was just so disinterested, and I didn't even want to do that. And I said, no, I'm not doing any of it. And I ripped up this paper, and I'm like, I'm not doing counseling. I'm not doing anything. And I said, God, if you want this to work, you're going to have to fix it, because I'm done. And I literally surrendered. And I can't tell you what happened, but over time, here we are, 36 years later.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Surrender's a great word.
Surrender. It's just like, give it up to God if it's supposed to work out, because I was just done. We cease fighting anyone or anything. And I was done fighting for my marriage. I was done fighting. And that's when I started writing. I was, worked part-time as a nurse. I got my twins. I just focused on my life, and it all just worked out. So that is miraculous, when we can let go. And that's what I want to focus on, is helping people with the surrender part of their recovery, with the surrender part of their living, because that's where we get strangled up, is in living and dealing with other people and relationships. And, and I think talking is overrated. Sometimes we need to shut up, and just let things work themselves out.
That is so true. The in the book, Raising the Bottom, I think you called surrender the epicenter of recovery. And, that is so true. And I love Glenn's story of surrender. And mine was not dramatic. Mine was simply just spitting the words out almost silently. Help. I need help. And, I've said it before, but I believe my God heard me say help. And then physically, my wife was in the room, go figure. And boy, that changed the trajectory of everything. Away we were off for help. But yeah, surrender, I believe I agree with you, is the epicenter of recovery. And I'm so glad that you wrote this book, because I think I have people in mind. I plan to be a repeat buyer, because I've underlined the snot out of mine. But first of all, I want to tell any of the male listeners out there that there's an absolute connection to this book, whether you're male or female. There's probably more stories from gals in there, and there's some great testimonies. There's a couple of guys in there, but as Glenn said, look for the similarities, and I found it, and I found a message of hope, because you talk about the 12-step, and you talk about how it keeps coming back to the 12-step, and maybe there are other things that work out there. And Glenn and I explore those on Sober.Coffee. It's probably not the only game in town. I just know that it's the game that keeps coming back to me. I'm surrounded by people that the 12-step recovery worked, and I believe, like you do, that Bill W. It was divinely inspired to write this book. It just makes so much sense, and I've got some people in mind that need to read this book, and I didn't know it, but I was one of them that needed to read this book, but I think that it is such a valuable tool, and it would melt my heart if a young lady, a young man got a hold of this book. It could change everything for them. It possesses that power. If you read the words, because you don't soft shell it, it's pretty straightforward what you're writing there, that there is hope, but it's going to take some work, and people want to avoid the hard way.
They want the overnight.
That's why people go to doctors, because they want that quick fix. But
I wanted a pill that would fix me tomorrow, and it doesn't work that way.
And I know there is no shortcut. But like what Mike was just saying, there was some lady on social media. This has been a couple of years now, but she contacted me and said she found my book in a library in Tennessee, and she got sober, and she's still sober. So I see her.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So Lisa, how do people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at L Boucher Author. I'm on Instagram, same handle. I'm on Facebook. And then my website, raisingthebottom.com. I think I'm going to be changing that. My website is undergoing. I think I'm changing that as well to L Boucher Author, just so that. Okay. Since I'm writing different books, but they could probably still find it under raisingthebottom.com, because I'm going to have them linked, and we're kind of in the process of revamping that right now.
Awesome.
And of course, Glenn, they can find a link to the book, as well as a link to her social media, Lisa Boucher's social media, in our resource room. The book
Sober.Coffee.
Sober.Coffee, yeah, not Sober.Coffee.com. We're just
Sober.Coffee. I know. Right. Biggest question. Is there a .com after Sober.Coffee? Nope. Sober.Coffee.
How did you get that where you didn't have to do a .com or a .org or?
I know, Glenn. He's our.
You guys are special.
Yeah, digital genius.
There.
Digital genius. Yeah, I'm special, all right. So, Lisa, thank you so much for jumping along with us. Thanks for joining us in the coffee shop. Thanks for sharing some tidbits. I love chewing on some of this with you. And, hey, I hope our paths cross again, and we can jump on another coffee.
That would be great. Thanks for having me, you guys. You're both terrific. Good talking with you.
Thanks,
Lisa. Thank you so much.
Send me the link, and I'll tweet it and Instagram it and stuff, and get you guys some more attention. You deserve a lot more.
Will do. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
You.
Have a great day.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@sober.coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.